Back, and we're live. Welcome to our reading of Glow, the autobiography of Rick Jones. And let's get ready for Glow. Give folks a chance to get in here. And here we go. Rufus is trying to steal the show. Slow down, Rufus. Okay. This can't be. Okay. Rufus on 2 tabs. Okay. All right, y'all. Amen. Good morning, and there's Sister Kim, number one. Number one spot, Be Unique B. Much love to you. SIL. Hi. Seventh Ward Creole. Good to be black. Okay, we will be praying for you, Sister Kim. That's okay. I understand it. I understand. Prayers for our Sister Kim, who's not been feeling well. Okay. No rush. Take your time. Big Sister Elaine C. Brother Piano Genesis. Melody's Child in Key. Sister LB. Brother Jonathan G. Amen. These videos of Rick have been filled with symbols through and through. And there's Brother Reg Mon, Isaiah Hawkins, Sister Damali. Thank you, Father. Praise God. Toda Abaya. Big Nephew Ronell. Thank you, Father. So glad that you're feeling better now, sis. And we will keep you in our prayers in Jesus' name. Barat. Peace and love to you. And of course, you know you got a t-shirt coming, making that beautiful design when you did. And the Father just put it on my mind when he did on how to put it on a t-shirt. And I appreciate you. I love you. All right, King of Kong. Just walked in. Let's get it in. Big Nephew Ronell is ready to go as well. Mike Jr. and Cookie Cruncher. So let's get going. Good to see you all.
Growing up, I guess I was sort of a ham, you know. I was like always kind of crazy, and I always liked entertainment, and I always liked singing, and just kind of joking around. My teacher either said I was going to be a hoodlum or a great entertainer. I wanted to be on the stage where bright light shine on me at Carnegie. I was in Canada, avoiding the draft, running away from the military. And I was sitting there, and I was underage anyways. They just wanted to get me, send me over there to Vietnam. I was sitting around a restaurant, and I had just left Buffalo, I just left New York. This friend of mine was saying, he says, yeah, you're running away from the service, you can't be up here, you gotta have another name. And this girl who was a singer in Canada, her name was Shirley Matthews, and she had a record called Big Town Boy. And I met her, she was there. She says, I got a cousin named Ricky Matthews. Why don't you call yourself Ricky Matthews? So I said Ricky, and I put my middle name James Matthews. And that's why I had the band with Neil Young, and me and Neil Young, and a couple guys who were Steppenwolf and stuff. And so it was Ricky James Matthews. And later on, I just changed it to Rick James.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rick James and the Stone City Band.
feel the need too much for school, you know. I mean, not that I was a dumb person, but maybe I just rebelled against being taught because I thought I was going to be a musician, and that was that. Then as I got older, I was going to African culture school. I mean, Swahili and about my African heritage. So I was very aware. I was more aware of things than most young black kids of my race. A lot of brothers, you know, would try to debate me with things, and they couldn't stand, you know, because I was just so aware. I mean, they didn't know anything about the Moors. They didn't know anything about W.B. Du Bois and Maya Angelou and I mean, they just went down on their culture. See, I mean, they weren't taught that in high school. They certainly didn't take it on their own. All they were down on revolution, you know. And I was very, very proud. Very angry inside, but very proud. I was pissed off. You know, I was pissed off at America, too, but I knew the reasons why. I could tell you our inventions, and I could tell you what we've done, and I could tell you how we spread, and I could tell you where the Indian came from, you know, the walkabout, and I could tell you all that shit, you know. And I was also very knowledgeable musically now, because Canada had really opened me up to blues and jazz more.
Brother John, I don't believe that he was, I don't believe that he became a made man until after he got to Canada and linked up with the people he linked up with there. But it's interesting here on the Rick James Glow cover, he's holding this light. Does anybody recall the cover for This Is It? Kenny Loggins. It's called Keep the Light. That's the album This Is It is on by Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald. And on the cover of that album, Kenny Loggins is holding a ball of light. I've shown this a couple of times. If I didn't show it right quick tonight, it would not be right. Real quick, I know what it's called. It's called Keep the Light, Kenny Loggins. Watch this. Keep the Light. And, of course, this is after they certainly know about the GOAT cover, album cover. There it is. I don't want to tell no lie. Here's a promo picture where he took one different than the cover. Oh, looking like a gay Jedi. Mm-hmm. Yeah. See? Mm-hmm. Anyway, okay. Okay. Let's go back to where it was at. Interesting. Interesting similarity. All right.
He doesn't like that situation to change it, but realizing also that he can't change it by himself, and it takes ambition. Some people say it's hard to imagine Neil Young and Rick James together, but really when you think about it, it's not. Because I was singing in those days, and I really wasn't playing guitar or anything. I was kind of playing a little harmonica and a little bit of acoustic guitar. And Neil was into very melodic chords, real pretty kind of chords, you know, and I would write kind of R&B lyrics over these chords. So really it was a very interesting combination, you know. If you listen to the stuff today, it's still credible, you know. I mean, there's still some credibility in the music, even now. And that was done in like the 60s, and me and Neil did this. Can I find out? Can I find out? All the spirits associated with black.
People just gonna do what they want to do tonight. Okay. All right, let's get right to our reading. That's how we do that. As you remember, he was about to go to Motown. Here we go. Ain't he a mess? Big nephew Ronell. He's a mess. Says, okay, here we go. Let's go. On the way to Detroit, when crossing over from Windsor, Canada, I got nervous. Marley was reassuring. If they ask, he said, I got papers here that will see us through. Just remember, though, I'm the only one who knows that you're AWOL. No one else needs to. I agreed. By then, I figured I'd beaten the odds and that as far as the Navy was concerned, I was a lost ball in the high weeds. As far as Motown was concerned, the minor birds were complete oddballs. When we arrived, sometime in 1966, it was culture shock. Detroit still looked like a city out of the 50s. The cats wearing slick down processed dues, sharkskin jackets, iridescent pants, shiny gaiters, stingy brim Stetsons. Everyone looked like a pimp. We looked like the hippies we were. My hair was out to there. My purple and black corduroy jeans had bell bottoms that covered my sandals. I wore a peace sign necklace and little oval John Lennon sunglasses. That's exactly what it says. I love to find typos in professional literature. I wore a peace sign necklace and little oval John Lennon sunglasses. My two favorite words were far out. Morley and John took us to meet Gordy and his boys. Our audition took place in an office building. Barry, a little guy, seemed to be in a hurry. He reminded me of a pug, a compact dog with a sweet face. I knew he'd been a boxer and had also written songs for Jackie Wilson. Given the number of stars he'd created, he had major cred. But he also had this high-pitched childlike voice that made it hard to take him seriously. He spoke in a whiny, sing-song manner, and when he spoke, all his minions kept quiet. Let's see what you got, he said. We played It's My Time, a song I'd written. I thought it was the best thing we'd ever done. I heard it as the Four Tops meets the Lovin' Spoonful, a combination of soul and folk rock. I was worried, though, that Barry wouldn't get it. I got it, he said, and I love it. I think it'll sell. You guys just need production help. Meet my man, Mickey Stevenson. Mickey Stevenson was Gordy's head of A&R, artists and repertoire. I saw right away that he liked Barry's boys, was a Barry Gordy wannabe. They all dressed and talked like the boss. It was a company of conformants. I also knew, though, that Mickey had co-written Dancing in the Street with Marvin Gaye and produced it for Martha and the Vandellas. I knew he'd worked with all the big Motown acts. If he wanted to work with us, fine, long as there was a contract. The contract was for 6 years. That's all I needed to hear. I didn't bother looking at the fine print. I was too excited about having my first record deal and an actual cash advance. It wasn't much, but it was something. We were on Motown. Mickey took us to the 2-story house on West Grand Boulevard that held the original Motown studios, the ones where all the hits had been cut. I was expecting something lavish. I told y'all it's just a house. Excuse me, sorry. I was expecting something lavish. What I saw was something sparse. I couldn't have been less impressed. Wow. But I couldn't have been more impressed when I saw who was sitting in the control room, Marvin Gaye, making something out of nothing. That's what we do, where we stay. When Marvin saw me standing there, he got up and reached out his hand for me to shake. Marvin Gaye, he said. I know, I said. I'm Ricky James Matthews. After we chatted for a while, I asked Marvin how the company decided who got to produce who. Well, it's survival of the fittest, brother, said Marvin. What does that mean? Well, it means it's a throat-cutting contest up in here. It ain't one big happy family. Marvin just laughed. His wasn't a harsh laugh, but an easy laugh. He was a gentle guy with a sweet smile and a soft disposition that made you feel like you were talking to a prince about to inherit his father's kingdom. There was something aristocratic about Marvin. In those days, he dressed Ivy League. White V-neck, tennis sweaters, and Brooks Brothers slacks, and liked to talk about Perry Como and Tony Bennett. He sang R&B, but he really wanted to be Frank Sinatra. I didn't see any reason why he couldn't be. As I hung around the studio and began to record under Mickey's supervision, I saw everyone. The great David Ruffin, lead singer of the Temptations, walked in one day with Tammy Terrell on his arm. Those duets between Marvin and Tammy were just getting started. I always thought Tammy was Marvin's girl, but Mickey set me straight. Marvin was married to Anna Gordy, Barry's sister, a woman 18 years older than Marvin. 1 second. Okay. Marvin married his mama, said Mickey. Anna leads him around like a dog on a chain. I saw Smokey Robinson, another easygoing superstar with a beautiful sunshine personality. The Isley Brothers, who had a smash with This Old Heart of Mine, and Norman Whitfield, a dark, brooding, light-skinned producer who done I Heard It Through the Grapevine for Gladys Knight and Marvin. He was an angry cat with a big chip on his shoulder. I got to meet all the Temptations. The bass singer, Melvin Franklin, was a distant relative of my mom's. Well, what a coinky-dink. As well as a guy who later became a close friend, Bobby Taylor, one of the singingest MFers on the planet. I related to Bobby because he grew up in the Black Hood of D.C., only to move to Vancouver, Canada, where with a mixed-race band called the Vancouvers, he made his move to Motown. Not long after we met, Bobby scored on two fronts. He'd have a hit about a black-white romance called Does Your Mama Know About Me? Never knew that there was a song like that. A song to go along with the Guess Who's Coming to Dinner vibe. Interesting. He'd have a hit about a black-white romance called Does Your Mama Know About Me? Written by Tommy Chong, later to become half of Cheech and Chong. And he'd discover the Jackson 5, only to have Gordy falsely credit Diana Ross for the discovery. He was going to falsely credit her with something. She didn't need no credit. She didn't deserve no credit. Non-singing woman. No, I'm sorry. Thank goodness for Diana Ross and the Supremes. Unlike the folk rock-edged Minor Birds, though, Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers were straight up soul. It was Bobby who pointed out a singer named Chris Clark. That's Barry's white bee, said Bobby. Stay away from her. Matter of fact, you best stay away from all the bees up in here, 'cause you don't know who's effing who. F the wrong one and you'll get effed. I took Bobby's advice. I didn't hit on any of the women, although all of them, especially Tammy Terrell, looked good to me. The truth is, I was practically too starstruck to do anything but stare at Diana Ross or Martha Reeves, remembering that only a few years ago, I was dancing on the streets of Buffalo to their songs. When Bobby introduced me to Clarence Paul, a friend of Mickey Stevenson's, and the guy who worked with Stevie Wonder, I asked if I could meet Stevie. The next day, there he was, the 16-year-old blind kid who was tearing up the charts with Uptight, Everything Is All Right. Stevie, I said, I won a talent contest in high school singing Fingertips. Let me hear it, said Stevie. Oh, man, I couldn't. Not what you looking at me. I can't see, remember? Sorry, Stevie. I didn't mean. I was just fooling with you. Go on and sing. I'm too nervous to sing in front of you. You got to. I did, and Stevie nearly fell out laughing. Love it, he said. What's your name? Ricky James Matthews. That's too long. Ricky James sounds more like it. Gonna remember you, Ricky James. Next time I see you, I'll be singing your hit. Mickey Stevenson took us into the little 8-track studio where he began to analyze our songs. I didn't like that at first. Who the F was he to tell me to change up my compositions? Well, he was a man with some big hits under his belt. So in spite of my resistance, I shut up and listened. He had some decent ideas about song structure and voicings. The cat actually taught me something. We were in there for days and guitar, an axe I hadn't ever used before. The song everyone most was It's My Time, the unanimous choice for our first single. I loved the message of the song. It was my time. I was at effing Motown Records. I was hanging with Marvin and Stevie. I was chatting up Levi Stubbs and Gladys Knight. It didn't matter that a lot of the cats like Harvey Fuqua and even Barry himself were laughing at my hippie look. With their showbiz Copacabana mentality, I knew they were a little behind the times, while I was on the cutting edge. I had me an import version of Jimi Hendrix' Are You Experienced from England before the album ever hit America. I was all over Sly Stone before any of those Motown execs realized that the musical world was in the middle of a revolution. As 1966 moved toward 1967, I had both my feet in the future. Now, I'm not saying that Motown didn't help me hone my craft, but they knew I was advanced. Even mean A. Norman Whitfield, a cat as bullheaded as me, had to give me my props. He asked me questions about where I got my grooves. Not much later, it was Whitfield who watched George Clinton's Parliament, an old-school doo-wop style group, morph into Funkadelic. Whitfield flat out copied their stuff and reinvented the Temptations with a Clinton meets Sly Stone sound on hits like Psychedelic Shack, Cloud 9, Papa Was a Rolling Stone, and Runaway Child Running Wild. Norman had the help of Dennis Edwards, the ferocious new lead singer for the Temptations, who replaced David Ruffin. But it was really Funkadelic's futuristic thinking that inspired those songs. High on my Motown sessions, convinced that the Minor Birds were going to be the next big thing, I flew from Detroit to Buffalo to see Mom. It had been 3 years. I loved this woman more than life herself. So after we embraced and I saw the fear in her eyes, I was alarmed. What could be wrong, Mom? I asked. This Motown thing is going to make me rich. I'm going to buy you a big house in the burbs so you'll never have to run no numbers again. It's the FBI, son. They still calling. They still looking for you. I got me a new name, a new ID. They ain't going to find me. I don't think you should stay around here, James. I think it's best that you go back to Toronto. Only if you go with me, Mom. I want you to see how I've become a star up there. I want you to meet my friends. It's a beautiful scene. I'd love to, but I won't be able to stay for more than a week. I believe you when you say that one day you'll be rich, but until that day arrives, I still have to work those numbers to buy the groceries. Motown's giving us an advance. My share is only a few thousand, but you take as much as you like. I'm not taking a dime. You earned it. You enjoy it. That was Mom, always putting her children ahead of herself. We drove from Buffalo to Toronto. Crossing the border, especially with Mom in the car, was a breeze. I loved showing her off to my friends and taking her to the clubs, where after my Motown score, I was treated like a conquering hero. She was proud and the first to say how she loved basking in my glory. She also liked Elk, the German chick who had turned me out. My energy was high, not only because the Minor Birds had a soon-to-be-released record, but also because I had fallen in love with speed. That wasn't anything I was ready to tell Mom. She thought I was excited from the music I was making and the recognition coming my way. But I was popping pills that had me racing even faster than my normally racy speed. I was in a hurry to see, do, and feel everything. I especially wanted to see that upfront Motown money. I kept asking Morley Shellman when our checks would be coming through, and he kept saying to ask John Craig, who in turn referred me back to Morley. I was getting sick of this S, but didn't want to start anything while Mom was in town. The minute she went to Buffalo, though, I called Morley, demanded my bread. That's when he told me to come out to his new house. When I did, I saw he also had a new motorcycle. As you can imagine, none of this went down well with me. In my imagination, I saw him spending our advance. I want the effing money now, I said. It should be here next week. Next week's not good at all. Next week's not good enough. I can't do anything about that. Well, I can. What? I can kick your... Oi! And I did. I didn't know it then, but kicking Marley's ass was tantamount to kicking my own A. For a week, I was glad to have put Marley and also John out of our lives. The minor birds didn't need them. The minor birds had a contract with Motown. Until the call came. Motown wasn't going to put out our record. Why? I asked their lawyer, who was calling from Detroit. Because you're a fugitive. You're wanted by the FBI. It didn't take Einstein to figure out what happened. Marley ratted me out. I figured it had to be him because outside my family, he was the only one who knew. I was sunk. Not only was the Motown contract gone, but so was the possibility of signing with any major American label. The FBI had blanketed the music industry, waiting for me to make my next move. They had alerted every record company to contact them the minute I approached. I was cornered. I couldn't get signed anywhere. All I could do was stay in Toronto. The other minor birds were understandably pissed that I had ruined our deal. I hadn't been straight up with them about my military status. Yet Neil Young and Bruce Palmer, both great guys, stayed loyal. They didn't kick me out of the band. But how could I stay in when my very presence would keep them from getting a deal? What the hell was I supposed to do? Come home, said Mom. You're going to have to face this sooner or later. Better give yourself up, do your time, and come out free. Then you'll be able to pursue your career. If you don't serve your time, you'll never be free. Mom was right. I was out of options. I hated like hell to give myself up to the man. Pardon me. I hated like hell to give myself up to the man. It was against everything in my nature. But because Motown had validated my talent, I knew I could break through to the big time. If that meant spending some time in the Brig, well, I'd do what I had to do. It all happened quickly. Still on speed, I raced back to Buffalo, called the FBI, and told them on a Friday to pick me up at Mom's Saturday morning. One last night with Mom, family, and friends. Got a treat for you, said Mom. I want to give you a memory to ease the pain of prison. What's that? I asked. Miles Davis is playing at the Royal Arms. I got us a table up front. Mom understood more than anyone. More than scoring some high-powered drug or some hot woman, I'd rather go see Miles than do anything else. I just bought his new record, Miles Smiles, which was the first time I heard his group with Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Ron Carter, and Tony Williams. In my mind, Tony was the most talented drummer since Art Blakey. The cat could play polyrhythms and cross rhythms like no one else. He was light as a feather, but strong as a raging river. Much as I dug Miles, I considered Tony the star of this group, and to see him live was the treat of a lifetime. True, I had effed up big time. True, I had cost myself and the minor birds a chance at Motown stardom. True, I had worked myself into this winless position where the FBI was coming to put my black A in prison. And all this before I turned 19. But to sit there in the club and watch Tony work his magic, to hear Herbie's beautiful chordings, Wayne's gorgeous sound, Ron's warm heartbeat, and Miles moaning low on his muted horn, I felt that God was in the room. God was with me. Mom had brought God with her. Next morning, Mom cried when the FBI men put me in cuffs and escorted me to their car. I was sad to leave my mother and uneasy about what the future held, but I'll be damned if I wasn't still hearing Miles in my head. I was carrying his joyful noise into whatever awaited me in the next chapter of my life. Now, we're at 30-minute mark for the night. We got 49 folks watching. Folks want to call it a night or carry on or what? Okay, we'll read one more then. Your nephew right now say good for one more. We'll read one more. Okay. Part 2. Breaking in. In and out. What was it like? Asked Brother Guru, wondering about the time the FBI came and got me in Buffalo. It was hell. Where'd they take you? They threw me in a brig at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. It was a lockdown on the top floor, one of the dorms in the base guarded by Marines. The Marines would rather beat you than look at you. They called me faggot and a sissy hippie because of my long hair. They cut my hair and took turns kicking the S out of me for no reason. They threw me in with the angriest cats, the ones in for assault or murder. Some of them had actually shot themselves as a way to leave Vietnam. Every one of those MFers had a story that could fill a book. But once they learned I could sing, they left me alone. The brothers would have me singing their favorite Otis Redding and Wilson Pickett songs. I told them that I had a deal with Motown, but most of them thought I was BSing. I bet you got in shape, though, says Brother Guru. Great shape. Went from a beanpole to 160 pounds of solid muscle. How long before your trial? Court-martial came after 7 or 8 months. Were you scared? Scared S-less. If they convicted me for desertion, I could spend the rest of my life in military prison. But I had a good naval lawyer. He had me testify how, in good conscience, I had turned myself in. He had me apologize and explain how my passion for music had gotten in the way of good judgment. I was contrite. Did you mean it? F no. But I sold it. I can act. And when it came to saving my skin, I put on an Academy Award-winning performance. And it worked. Like a charm. I was charged with AWOL, not desertion. That meant I could get out in another 6 or 7 months. And the me monster was back in charge. Why y'all gotta be talking about the me monster? You the one doing the talking. You the one telling me how you fooled the system. I did more than that. I say I broke out of that MFO. How'd you do that? With the help of 2 friends, Doc, a brother, and Eddie, who was half black, half Puerto Rican. Doc said he'd pull a big job before he was put in the brig and had 35 large ones stashed at his mom's crib, right there in Brooklyn. By then, we were in a looser part of the lock-in because the 3 of us had been perfect prisoners. Doc had also gotten close to one of the guards who got sick and had to go home early. He asked Doc to close down the mess hall. Doc alerted us. After the other prisoners had left, Doc showed us the one door that led to the emergency exit. Beyond that door was a staircase that went all the way down to the street and freedom. Our only choice was to kick in the door, and that would make a racket. Doc found a couple of clothing carts that made even more of a racket when they rolled across the mess hall. So while Eddie and Doc were rolling the carts, I was kicking in the door. It finally broke open, an alarm went off, but we were down to 6 flights and out on the street before the guards had time to react. Sunlight! We put on our regulation Navy hats and calmly walked off the base. Doc, the Brooklyn native, led the way to Flatbush Avenue, where we caught a cab. We'd done it! We'd flown the effing coop. Congratulations, says Brother Guru. You don't believe me? I ask. Sure, I believe you. You were Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. Right on. That's just how I felt. It's a beautiful story, Rick. Except for one thing. What's that? You're in jail telling the story. Brother Guru was always busting my chops. I don't mind, though, because he's a good listener and someone who's helping me remember all the crazy S that happened to me. I remember that first week of freedom. Turned out Doc wasn't BSing. He did have a wad of cash stashed at his mother's. He picked it up, gave us each a nice taste, and the 3 of us were on our way to a 3-bedroom penthouse suite in Midtown Manhattan. Ray Charles had a hit out called Let's Go Get Stoned. Yeah, that's Ray Charles. They didn't mention that in the movie. They were playing it on the radio every 5 minutes. Playing it on the radio every 5 minutes. So next time, nieces and nephews, next time they clowning y'all about your music, you remind them about Ray Charles, Let's Go Get Stoned, playing on the radio every 5 minutes. And sure enough, an hour after we checked into the hotel, there was a knock on the door. Doc's dope man had arrived with something for everyone. Doc was deep into skag. Eddie and I weren't into heroin, but we gorged ourselves on smoke and coke. That night, Doc's lady came by with 2 super fine bees. There's nothing like your first F after being locked up for nearly a year. P never tasted so sweet, except that elk tasted even sweeter. By the end of that week, we'd flown to Toronto where I thought we'd be safer. Elk and I F for 3 days straight. I fixed up Doc and Eddie with some of Elk's friends and things were mellow. And things were mellow until word got around that the FBI was after me. We hightailed it to Montreal, where we hung for a month. We were still high on the excitement of being fugitives, not to mention the high of the coke, smoke, and smack. I was sitting in at a club singing Billy Stewart's stuttering version of Summertime. Billy was Doc's favorite. When afterward, this smoking hot long-legged bee came up and said she was an acrobat at the circus and loved her some soul singing. For the rest of the trip, she had me wrapped around her finger. Not that I'm complaining. I loved how she contorted her body to where she could lick her. Her high-wire act was something I'll never forget. Meanwhile, I was forgetting all reality until I called home to check on Mom. "What do you think you're doing, son?" she asked. "Just avoiding jail, that's all." "Not for long, James. They back on your tail. They calling every day. I don't even want to know where you at, 'cause they probably got this phone tapped. You got to come on in." "Not yet. Not now. Longer you stay out, worse it's gonna get. I've been in touch with my cousin, Louis Stokes. He's been elected a United States Congressman." "Cousin Louis from Cleveland?" "The same. I told him all about your situation. He checked with the Navy. He says they're anxious to get rid of you. They're as anxious to get rid of you as you are to get rid of them." "What does that mean?" "It means if you turn yourself in now, Louis can help. But you got to turn yourself in." "Again?" "Hell yes, again," said Mom. So here we go again. I packed my bag, bought a plane ticket to Buffalo, and found myself flying home when I picked up a magazine someone had left on my seat. Mindlessly, I leafed through the pages. Vietnam was still tearing the country apart. Counterculture leaders were calling for BNs. The Black Panthers, who I dug for their gutsy FU attitude, were making noise in Oakland. All this was interesting, but the article that stopped me cold concerned music. It mentioned 2 groups, Buffalo Springfield, featuring Neil Young and Bruce Palmer, and Steppenwolf, featuring Goldie McJohn. Both groups had major record deals and were the talk of L.A. Those were my boys. While I was running in and out of prison, my boys had carried on with the music and gotten somewhere. The article talked about the new soulful folk rock sound they had cultivated up in Canada. I was part of that cultivation. I might even have been the major part of that cultivation. Now all I was cultivating was the thought of being thrown back in the Brig to face another trial. Right then and there, I pledged that if cousin Congressman Stokes could help me put this Navy thing behind me, I'd make my way straight to L.A. like so many other teenagers in the country. I was California dreaming. Back to Buffalo. Another beautiful reunion with Mom, who, no matter how I messed up, never stopped believing that I'd eventually straighten up and fly right. Another call to the FBI. Another pair of agents who came to cuff me. Another trip back to Brooklyn. What was new, though, was the reception I got when I returned to that top-floor Brig in the dorm. I got a standing O. I was greeted like a hero. I was the cat who escaped. I tried to give credit where credit was due. Doc was the mastermind. But since Doc was still at large, I got the respect. I also got lucky. During my second court-martial, the court was lenient. I was given a general discharge. This is a little amazing. This is a little amazing. 2 court-martials. And they didn't throw this Dark brother up under the jail. I also got lucky. During my second court martial, the court was lenient. I was given a general discharge. I was told I'd only have to serve 6 more months. That's because I'd enlisted when I was underage at 16, and also because they were tired of me. My escape had embarrassed them, and they feared I'd do it again. Now I just had to get through another half a year, knowing that I had somehow beat the system. The supervisors and guards put me through my paces those last months. I was back to scraping S off toilet bowls, washing dishes in burning hot water, and mopping the kitchen floor. One of the guards, a racist a-hole named Leo, had it out for me. One morning when he saw me on my knees cleaning tile, he kicked my A so hard I fell on my face and busted my nose. I went for his throat, but before I could do anything, he had a gun to my head. I was determined to get him back, but I had to wait. 2 months later, when they gave me potato peeling duty, I managed to slip a mashed up dead cockroach into the bowl of bean soup he was being served. Oh my God. Oh boy. Payback's a mother or a little brown brother. Whew. I managed to slip a mashed up dead cockroach into the bowl of bean soup he was being served. The next day he didn't report for duty because he said he was sick as a dog. I only wish the cockroach had been poisonous. On the bright side of my final time in the Brig was a young brother from Seattle called Fire Ride. His first year in the service, he got caught stealing Navy cars and selling them on the black market. Hot cars, okay. He said he was named after that horse that won his daddy $10,000 the day he was born. Wow. He also said he knew Jimi Hendrix and came loaded with not only with Hendrix records, but all kinds of great music. Yeah, David Rich didn't halfway edit this. About the 4th typo that we've experienced since reading this book. Interesting. He was just trying to get this great story out there. Okay. There was a little phonograph in the rec room that we could use on certain nights. That's where me and Fire Ride got tight. At the same time, Doc was back in the Brig. They'd caught him in Montreal. And he had a connection in Brooklyn where we got the freshest records off the street. So me, Doc, and Fire Ride would have these listening sessions that opened up my ears to everything happening on the outside. The first side that came in was 2 for the Price of 1, an album that blew my mind. The artists were Larry Williams and Johnny Guitar Watson. The cover flipped me out. Larry and Johnny each standing on the hoods of Cadillacs while holding leather reins like cowboys riding their steeds. The music was cold-blooded. Yeah, Johnny Guitar can go. The music was cold-blooded. Mom had Larry's old R&B hits in her collection, Boney Maroney and Short Fat Fanny. And I remember hearing Johnny's space guitar when I was a little kid. Hendrix memorized space guitar, said Fire Ride. That's where he got the idea of all that feedback and distortion. He stole that S from Johnny. In 2 for the Price of 1, I heard how Johnny was putting a new kind of hurting on the funk. Yes, he was. He was edgier than just about anyone else out there. He pushed the envelope in the same direction I would have pushed it had I not been locked up. He even had the cojones to call a song Coke. Like me, Johnny knew how to blend R&B and jazz. On that record, he put lyrics to a song Joe Zawinul had written for Cannonball Adderley. Mercy, 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 a combination jazz R&B soul hit. Meanwhile, rumors were coming in from the street that Miles was going electric and using Zawinul, Chick Corea, and guitarist John McLaughlin. We were also jamming to Sly, the master blaster of the 60s. His bass player, Larry Graham, had a thumb-popping attitude that made all of us take note. There were other super funky bass players, a bad white boy named Duck Dunn, and of course Paul McCartney. But Graham came on with some S we'd never heard before, or Larry Graham. Fire Ride and Doc weren't crazy about the Beatles' White Album, but I was. Loved the funky Rocky Raccoon, loved the ballads like Blackbird and While My Guitar Gently. The Beatles were also pushing the envelope, writing killer songs like Happiness is a Warm Gun, where their sleight of hand humor made a mockery of cornball pop music. The Beatles were out there. I couldn't wait to get out there so I could do what the Beatles, Johnny Guitar Watson, and Miles Davis were doing. I knew GD well. I was hearing everything they heard. I could make righteous musical combinations of my own. I could bend and blend genres slick as anyone. Once you get out, said Fire Ride, I'm going to hook you up with Hendrix. Jimmy's going to love you. He might even put you in his band. Hey, I said, he'd be lucky if I put him in my band. Don't forget us when you get out there, said Doc, taking off this gorgeous record by Rahsaan Roland Kirk, The Inflated Tear, and putting on Big Brother and the Holding Company's Cheap Thrills. The album had a live cut, Ball and Chain, sung by this bad bee, Janis Joplin. If Hendrix is going to be my new guitarist, Janis was going to be my new chick singer. Janis Joplin. Spelled the unusual way, Janis, Jan and S. For ISIS. It's all going to happen, said Doc. Just make sure I get to see you do it. You'll be road manager, I told him. And my man Fire Ride be my musical consultant. The three of us had beautiful times listening to sounds. Those nights got me through the abuse I was taking from Leo and the other redneck crackers. One morning, Leo came to me while I was scrubbing the pots and pans. The big smile on his face worried me. I'd never seen that MF smile, not once. Too bad you won't be able to get any more of that jungle music snuck in here, he said. What are you talking about? Doc, the guy who gets you all your records, he won't be getting them no more. How do you know that? Because he's dead. I nearly stopped breathing. Who killed him? No one. The dumb bastard killed himself. Doctor says he OD'd. The dope got him so crazy that he jimmied up a window and jumped out. That don't make no sense. Neither does taking dope or listening to jungle music. Both things make you want to kill yourself. I wanted to kill Leo, but was too shocked to do anything. Losing Doc was rough. He was a good cat. He was one of my main supporters. He saw my talent and never got tired of telling people that I was going to make it. The only relief came when I was transferred to another naval and marine prison. Military programming. This one in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was glad to get away from Leo and the a-hole guards in Brooklyn. Portsmouth was more chilled. I got to sing for the prisoners in the mess hall, one of the most appreciative audiences I'd ever encountered. Otis Redding had died the year before, and once I sang The Dock of the Bay, one of the brothers yelled, "Otis has come back from the grave. Sing on, Otis." They made me sing the song 6 straight times. When I finally got out, I went to Buffalo to be with Mom. "You're free now, son," she said. "You finally put all that Navy stuff behind you. So, what are you going to do?" "I'm not sure, but it's got to have to do with music." "Can you do it here?" Mom asked. "I'd love to stay with you, Mom, but nothing's happening in Buffalo. You can't launch a career from Buffalo." "Will you go back to Toronto?" "Toronto's not that far, and I saw for myself how you're already a star in Toronto." That weekend, I went to Toronto, thinking that it'd be cool to stay in a city only 100 miles from home. But when I got there, I realized that the entire gang was gone. I knew that Joni Mitchell, Bruce Palmer, Neil Young, and Goldie McJohn had left, but I didn't know that Elk had gone back to Europe. Toronto was always cool, and Yorkville always hip, but it felt like its time had passed. I found some good musicians who I knew from before and worked up a little band. I figured some of the old club owners would be glad to see me fronting my group. Wrong. The old club owners didn't give a S, and I couldn't find a single gig. PO'd and discouraged, I spent my money on speed and coke. When the dope ran out, the dealer told me he'd give me a free resupply if I helped him break into this super hip boutique. He knew where we could fence the mod clothes for good bread. My man promised there wouldn't be any problems. The back window would be easy to unlock, and there were no alarms. All that proved true. I did the job, copped the clothes, keeping some choice items for myself, and stayed stoned for another week. After the high wore off, I hit a new low. I wanted to play music, but it seemed like the city that had once been in love with Little Ricky, the Sailor Boys, and the Minor Birds no longer gave a rat's tail about me. "Home so soon?" said Mom when I returned from Canada after just a month. "It ain't happening there," I told my mother. "Then where is it happening?" "L.A." "Oh, baby, California's such a long way off. How about New York?" "Well, maybe I'll try Florida first. Maybe I'll take a run down to Miami." "What's down there?" "A buddy from high school. You remember Big Red? He's living down there and says he can hook me up at Criteria Studios. Aretha's been recording there. So has James Brown. It's a hot spot. Just be careful. I always am." I never was. Big Red, an albino brother, was a major coke dealer who supplied the superstars in Miami. He had the run of all the studios, and the minute I got off the Greyhound, he took me to Criteria. First cat I met was Sam Moore, who was doing a solo album. When his bass player didn't show up, I asked the producer if he had an extra axe. He did. Sam liked my playing, and suddenly I was gainfully employed. Criteria became my hang. I crashed at Big Red's oceanfront crib. I liked the beach scene. Big Red had all sorts of hot women, Righteous Blow and Mellow Weed. He was convinced that his homeboy from Buffalo was going to be bigger than Sly Stone. I loved his support. He never let me pay for a thing. Big Red was proud that his childhood pal could hang in the studio with the big dogs. At Criteria, I got to play with Dwayne Allman and Steve Cropper, two super bad white boy guitarists who showed me a slew of new licks. They were both brilliant. So was Cornell Dupree, maybe the slickest R&B guitarist ever. I spent days in the studio studying Cornell's style. Looked like Miami might work out. My chops were getting sharper. Producers started calling me on a regular basis, and I figured soon I'd be able to bust out with my own material. Being a sideman was cool, but it wasn't me. Just when I thought I'd found a home in Miami, Big Red got popped. It happened on a Saturday. I had been at Criteria and didn't get back to the crib till midnight when I saw four or five cop cars parked out front, their lights flashing. Man, that was a scary sight. I figured it was best not to go in. I figured right. That night I went to stay with another friend of Red's who told me it was a bad bust and that the police, who had the place under surveillance, were looking for anyone associated with Big Red. Since I'd been living with him for over a month, that meant me. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "Get out of Dodge." Next day, I was back on the bus to Buffalo. "What now?" Mom asked when I got home. "Not sure." "You still thinking California, aren't you, baby?" "You know me." "Well, if you gotta go, you gotta go. Just wish it wasn't so far." Much to Mom's credit, she didn't try to hold me back. She cared more about my career than keeping me close to her. "I'll send for you as soon as I get settled and get me some serious money," I promised. "I know you will. You're just going to have to be a little patient." "I'm not worried about my patience, son. I got lots." "I don't mean this harshly, James, because you know how much I love you. But you've got the patience of a butterfly. The second you land on one flower, you off looking for another." Words to remember from a mother, ain't it? Very good. Good night to you, Sister Kai Brown. And peace and blessings to you and your family, too. And Spiritual Warrior, peace and blessings to you. And that concludes our reading for tonight. Thank you all. That's an interesting assessment, Mike Jr. Thank you, Sister Vanette. King Kong say one more. Oh man, I I thought y'all was just about done with Rick James. I was gonna take Rick James out the lineup, but okay. The book is getting a little bit better, but no, we'll save some more for later on this week or something. Okay? Yeah, we'll save some more for next week. 5:30. Let y'all get some sleep, and me too. It's 5:26. And thank you, spiritual warrior. Thank you for hanging in there. So yeah, y'all requested one more. I went one more, but I gotta go. You too, Sister Shatra. Sleep well and God bless you. And peace and blessings to you, Sister Lisa. That's right. Anything he could do to make it interesting. Yes, Sister Stella, I'm noticing that too. It's less ABC as it goes farther along. Almost like they use that to try to hook people into the beginning. Spiritual word said, "I'll stick around if you do one more." Well, I hope that you'll come back another time and meet us. Let's see. I'm not yawning that bad. What time? It's 5:20. Okay, okay. You only read one more. Spoiled people's you. Well. Dr. G say we want it now. This ain't J.G. Wentworth. This is T.R. Jackson. Okay, we'll read one more. Okay. Don't y'all want to stop right before he go to Cali? Oh, God bless you, Sister Lisa. Okay, yes, it's been a mutiny. No, we'll read one more. Okay, all right, we'll read one more. All right, Mike Jr. All right. Okay, let's do it. One more. One more. Okay, here it is. Cali is the name of the chapter. Even though it was the end of the 60s when I got there, LA felt like the beginning of something new and wonderful in my life. The hippie vibe had spread to LA where it took a different form than I'd seen in Buffalo, Toronto, and New York. To me, LA was hippie land. Hippies gave the city its flavor. There wasn't the tension I'd felt back east between the hippies and the squares. Here, the hippies blended. Maybe because LA was laid back, everyone left the hippies alone. They were part of the landscape, like the palm trees and the hills, like the beaches and the valleys. Man, the hippies were everywhere, especially on the Sunset Strip and along Hollywood Boulevard. Laurel Canyon, wink, looked like a camp for hippies. The cats had longer hair than the chicks. That's a mind control community. That community was filled with artists who were CIA implants and mind controlled entertainers. Laurel Canyon, without a doubt. Okay, Laurel Canyon looked like a camp for hippies. The cats had longer hair than the chicks. Hardly any of the chicks were wearing bras under their tie-dyed tops. Stoned-eyed guys were offering up free joints. Stoned-eyed gals were offering up free love. Free joints and free love, not to mention the warm Cali sunshine, had me believing that the world was really changing. I was in a better place. All the bitterness I'd felt in prison, all that resentment built up during my days as a half-A hardened criminal, it all lifted. LA was taking me to another place where it was all about peace and love. My first day in L.A. was one mellow surprise after another. Bruce Palmer picked me up at the airport in a red Mustang convertible. The joints were rolled and ready to light. "You need to meet Stephen Stills," said Bruce. "Stills is the magic ingredient in our new band." I didn't know whether I was included in the hour or not, but the weed had me kicked back until I didn't need to ask. Time would tell. It was just cool to be floating through the L afternoon, feeling the mild ocean breeze and sweet sunshine in my face. I felt at peace. "Peace, brother," Stephen Stills said to me when he greeted me at the door of his house. "Heard good things about you." "Same here," I said. Another band member called Richie Furay approached me. "You're the famous little Ricky from Toronto," he said. I said, "Not so famous and not so little." He laughed and offered me more killer weed. He talked much S, and we got along great. I liked Richie a lot, a happy-go-lucky cat with no attitude. Couldn't say the same for Stills. He didn't engage me in conversation and wasn't the least bit interested in learning anything about me. Underneath his silence, I felt the presence of a big ego. "We need to see Neil," said Bruce. "He's been asking for you." We all hightailed to Neil Young's log cabin in the hills. From Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. He greeted us in full Indian regalia. In other words, he was dressed like a Native American. We hugged like long-lost brothers and shot the stuff for hours. He wanted to hear my war stories, and I was eager to tell him. Neil and I had a great rapport, two wild artists who understood each other on the deepest level. Wink. As we spoke, I saw Stills watching out of the corner of his eye. Jealousy. Instincts told me that all was not cool between Neil and Stephen. All was completely cool when we arrived at David Crosby's. Uh-oh, there it is. David Crosby is definitely a CIA asset. Hands down, without a doubt. So after we read this, we're going to have to read Strange Scenes Inside the Canyon. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, excuse me. Okay, all was completely cool when we arrived at David Crosby's. David had the kind of smoke that came straight from the CIA, and I smoked some every day. David had the kind of smoke that melted tension and turned antagonists into allies. He had that special formula, the extra whip on it. This smoke had me loving on the world. Like me, David was a storyteller who liked to entertain his guests. "Got some clear acid for you," he offered. "Thanks," I said, "but I just got here. Gonna wait a minute or two to get my bearings before I start tripping." "Can't wait no longer, we're gonna miss the Daily Flash," said Bruce. "They're playing the whiskey." More joints, more cruising down the canyons, more cruising up the strip. Got to the Whiskey a Go-Go and realized I didn't have the bread to get in. "Don't even think twice about it," said David Crosby. "This is your welcome to L.A. night. The champagne's on me." Of course. The first act, the Daily Flash, sounded like a second-rate Jefferson airplane. The next act, though, took me by surprise. They were a mixed group. Leader singer Arthur Lee and guitarist Johnny Echols were black, and the other cats were white. They played in an acid folk rock style that had the place jumping, but I wasn't impressed. I was thinking, if these LA hippies are going nuts over this jive, wait till they hear me, I'm going to tear this town apart. Maybe Arthur and Johnny sensed my attitude when Bruce introduced me to them, because they were a little standoffish. They were like gunslingers looking over the new kid in town. That night I crashed at Bruce's. I closed my eyes and thought back about why it had taken me so long to get to Cali. This was the state of my mind. L.A. was the city of my soul. I felt right at home here. Musically, I knew just what was happening. I wasn't in the least intimidated, just frustrated that I had gotten a late start. In spite of our initial standoff, Johnny Echols of Love became a good friend and took me to some slamming Hollywood parties. At one of them, I met a sister named Jade. She told me that she'd been living with Donovan. Naturally, I knew Donovan's Sunshine Superman and Mellow Yellow. They call it Mellow Yellow. Cute stuff, but not my thing. I told Jade that I considered Donovan the poor man's Bob Dylan. You're always so opinionated, she asked. Always. At least when it comes to music and women. What kinds of opinions do you have about women? That you are by far the most beautiful I've ever met. That's an opinion I like. We loved that night and for 3 days after, and for 3 nights after. Bruce was good to me, and so was Steven, although neither one invited me to join their band. No matter. I was still happy to be invited to Steele's house where I'd go to jam. Sometimes I'd crash on his couch. Steele's place was a great spot for meeting musicians and chicks. Yeah, right. It was at Steele's that I met Donovan, Jade's ex. Naturally, I didn't say a word. Steele's crib was a strange but fascinating scene. The start of the extreme strangeness. Happened the night I awoke to see a young dude sitting on the floor in the lotus position, stoned as a MF. Nothing unusual about that, except for the blood dripping from his wrist. He seemed hypnotized by the flow of his blood, saying things like, "Isn't the blood beautiful? Isn't that the deepest red you've ever seen?" I got scared he was going to bleed to death and ran to get Steven out of the bed he was sharing with his girlfriend, whom I'll call Perfect. "Oh, F," said Steven. "He's doing it again." Steven gathered up bandages and gauze and took care of the guy, who remained passive through the ordeal, a mind control victim. When Steven was through, he said to me, "Ricky, meet Jim Morrison, most certainly a mind control victim." Wow. Jim Morrison of the Doors. Morrison, that's who was cutting himself, sitting there in a lotus position. Yep. Morrison was one far-out cat. He was the first sure enough poet I'd ever met, and he was also connected to the military occult complex to one of his relatives. So was Crosby. From Crosby, Stills, and Nash. So whether Rick knows it or not, he's surrounded by some high-level devils, by some high-level CIA devils, implants in the music business. Wow, interesting. This is what we're looking for. Okay. It says Morrison was one far-out cat. He was the first show-enough poet I'd ever met. He didn't speak or act like the rest of us. He spoke and acted poetry. He started reading me something he'd written about the dead. About the dead angels of history returning as groupies. He started singing a song about love among the ancient Indians who worshiped the sun. I didn't think he could sing worth a S, but his lyrics were enchanting. You had to listen to this guy. When he asked about my past and I mentioned my stopover at Motown, he bombarded me with questions about Smokey Robinson and Marvin Gaye. He called them great poets, and he was right. Next day, his wounds healed. Jim joined the rest of us on a trip to Disneyland. Mind control. I was excited to see the place. We ran down the freeway in Steven's wooden station wagon, but were turned away because our hippie threads were too far out for white bread Disney. F Disney. We went to some dumpy bumper car place and had a ball. The more I hung, the more I was digging L.A. The big night was when the Doors, the house band at the Whiskey, opened for Buffalo Springfield. I know that the Doors became one of the biggest bands in history, and Morrison, like Dylan, influenced the world. I also know that Jim was sincere and that he was one of the inventors of theatrical rock. Until Jim, I always thought a singer had to be a guy with a great voice. Jim showed me that attitude was as important as his voice. And also placement, being placed in rotation, having the powers that be place you on circulations and give you interviews and put you on television and the radio. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I always knew that Jim was sincere and that he was one of the inventors of theatrical rock. Until Jim, I always thought a singer had to be a guy with a great voice. Jim showed me that attitude was as important as voice. In years to come, David Bowie and Lou Reed would also get by on attitude, a slew of other ones too. I call them the Struggle Voice All-Stars. And Rick James, little does he know it, would certainly be a member of the Struggle Voice Funketeer Squad. Yes, starting member. David Bowie. Fire in my rock and more funk in my folk. The Doors were weak tea. Ouch. Have mercy. After the Doors set, I was hanging with Morrison in his dressing room. We were sharing a joint and shooting the S when he asked me if I wanted a mint. Sure, I said. He popped this little blue mint into my mouth. I didn't think anything of it. As I picked up one of his acoustic guitars and started to strum, the mint tasted sour, but then turned sweet. What is this? I asked Jim. Happy sailing, he said. Acid. Oh well. It was going to happen sooner or later. Now was as good a time as any. Soon I started feeling a little strange. My fingers numbed out and the world turned extra bright. That's when Jade appeared. You look effed up, Ricky, she said. Morrison slipped me acid. I'm tripping myself. Mind if I join you? Let's take off together. I'm an uninhibited guy, but I usually don't start sexing a chick in a dressing room with the door unlocked. But that's the first thing that happened on my maiden acid voyage. Jade and I melted into each other. We went down to the bottom of the mystical sea. I believe you. Marine spirits. Yes. God knows how long we were down there. The Lizard King gave you the keys to the lizard realm. Later, Morrison told me that people were passing through the room while we were smashing. But damned if I knew. I was swimming through a sea of love I had never seen before. If LSD opened the floodgates of this kind of loving, I wanted more. I officially became a love child. Because I was too busy tripping sexing, I missed hearing Buffalo Springfield that night. I did, though, get a chance to hear them many times after that. I heard them as good, not great, but I'm sure my opinion was prejudiced by the fact they still hadn't asked me to join them. With me as their lead singer, I was convinced the band would improve by at least 50%. That's exactly what he said. Yes, he worked it down to a mathematical formula. After several months in L.A., I saw that I could hang with the heavyweights. The only thing they had that I lacked was money. And I knew it wasn't only a question of time before I'd get mine. Meanwhile, I was honing my music hustling skills, and essential for success in the record biz. I was meeting all the right people. I got lucky when Stephen Stills didn't want to take Perfect to a fancy party thrown by J.C. Brig, a cat who'd made millions selling hair products. You take Perfect, said Stephen. You get along with everyone. I'm fed up with that Hollywood crowd. Well, I was just getting started with the Hollywood crowd and jumped at the opportunity. It felt a little strange to be trusted with Perfect, who was super hot, but she was game and so was I. Sebring was cool. He turned out to be one of the era's slickest movers and shakers. He took a liking to me, and I saw he took an extra specking to Perfect. Everyone was blowing cocaine and dancing to Marvin's I Heard It Through the Grapevine. Jay saw that me and Perfect were the ideal party people, and a week later invited us back. Naturally, I asked Stills if it was okay. He had no objections, and we went back over to Sebring's place several times. Hold your hat, hold your hat, hold your hat. That's where I met Sammy Davis and Steve McQueen. It's also where I saw Sebring making a move on Perfect. The truth was that Perfect had the hots for me, not Jay. And man, I had the hots for her. Yet I restrained myself. I didn't want to betray Stephen. I also didn't want to hurt her budding friendship with Sebring because I saw how much he respected her. Perfect had a brilliant business mind. and was starting to give him advice about his products. That's when I got an idea. Intellectual property? Before we walked into one of Sebring's high time parties, I said to Perfect, get him to back a band for me. Tell him I'm the next Sly Stone. You are, said Perfect. Get him to believe that. Get him to give me some bread. I know the musicians I need. They're in Toronto. I could fly them there. I could fly there and within a few weeks get a band together that would tear up this town. Will you talk to him? I will. She did. And guess what? J. Sebring sprang for the bread with one condition, that Perfect accompany me to Toronto and supervise the operation. How lucky can one man be? My glow was getting brighter by the day. And now, putting Rick James away. And thank you so much for everybody who was able to stay. I thank you for folks who were able to hit the like button. If you are unable or unwilling, I'm not speaking to you, but to folks who can do so, please do hit it. I appreciate that. I thank you for showing your appreciation. It's 5:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And God bless you, Sister Judge Lynn Bond in the house. Always good to see you. Yeah, Agent Rick, that's what it's looking like, Mike. That's what it's looking like. And thank you. Glad you enjoyed Big Nell. And yes, Sammy was a card-carrying member of the Church of Satan. Interesting, the cats that he's aligning himself with by chance, a happenstance, a circumstance, or dirty hands. I don't know. But he's certainly lining up with some characters here. He's meeting some characters. It's shaping up to be the same deal, right? Perhaps David Ritz don't even write your book unless you're down in the dirt with the brotherhood or the sisterhood in Aretha's case. That's probably what it is. So, thank you. Right on. Brought to you by Soul Glow. Probably right. Just let your soul glow. Let it shine through. Okay. All right, y'all. Yeah, all the agents, all who hung around. Peace and blessing to you, Sister Sabrina. So glad that you could catch it too. And hey, I guess I had to do it, Jonathan G. I felt that, I was already shortchanging people by not having, he came to set the captives free. So I had to make up for it somewhere. That's like forgetting to bring the vegetables, but saying, okay, well, I'll double up on ice cream for y'all. Terrible. Terrible. That's what's wrong with me now. That's what's wrong with me right now. Okay. All right, y'all. All right, y'all. It's real this time. Peace and blessings. We're going to go out with a couple tunes, starting with I Must See My Lord. And some of y'all must see the insides of your heads. So to you, I say good night. And to folks who want to chop it up a little taste and say their good nights and their goodbyes like folks do in here, you've got a couple songs too in here, okay? You've got a couple songs to do so. All right? All right, y'all. In a minute. Well, now you've had ice cream too, Melody's Child and Keith. Always good to see you in the house. Much respect to you, Mike Jr. Peace, blessings, and love to you. Thank you all. I'm out. I'll catch you on a surprise show sometime this week. The Lord says the same. Shalom.
I will see my Lord. 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 See my Lord. I will see my Lord. You want to see him? Heaven's where he'll be. Lord, his love today. It's long distance, but it's so free. Jesus paid the price. Sacrifice. I will see my Lord. 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 Lord Jesus is coming back again. Heal, give rest to me. And this whole world still. I am headed bound. And there's no turning around. I must see my Lord. 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 I want to see my Lord. See my Lord. I must see my Lord. If I could just see my Lord. See my Lord. I must see my Lord. I want to see my Lord. See my Lord. I must see my Lord. I got to get my house in order. See my Lord. I must see my Lord. As I go along from day to day, I thank the Lord He has made my way. Standing there when I'm up, lift me up and down. Lord, He never found me. He's always around. That's why I'm thankful. Oh, yes, I am. Oh, Lord, thank God I am. Hey. Late last night, I fell off asleep. Woke up this morning, strong as I could be. Give all my pain, I give it all to Him. Didn't have to move, not one single limb. That's why I'm thankful. Oh, yes, I am. Hey, Lord. Oh, yes, I am. Now listen, He let me live. See another day, Lord, I'm thankful. Oh, yes, I am. Well, He moved all the stumbling blocks out of the way. Lord, Lord,
I wouldn't be surprised if he said dopey, sneezy, happy, doc. And that's wrong. We're gonna go out like this. You will be missed. So I'm sure to be back to do a surprise show. But now I'm gonna let everybody go.
Sisters and brothers,
Shalom.
and all of my friends, let's come together and pray again. The sign of Jesus. Almighty God, who has control. He healed the sick and he raised the dead. You can read your Bible and read what it said. Come on, praise God. Yeah, I'm gonna praise the Lord God. One day I got in my heart with the Father. I got involved with the Son. I'm gonna stay involved with the Holy Spirit. It's all in one now. Yes, it is. My Jesus Christ, the Lord, is in charge. Yes, He is. Well, He is the one to call. He loves us all. God loves us all. Will shed His blood. My Jesus never said one word. I'm gonna stay involved with the Father. I'm gonna stay involved with the Son. You better get involved with the Holy Spirit. It's all in one. Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it is. Praise ye the Lord, sing unto the Lord a new song. Well, let's praise Him in the congregation of the saints. Praise ye the Lord, I will praise the Lord with my whole heart. In the assembly of the upright and in the congregation. Praise ye the Lord, from the heavens, praise Him in the high. Loud sound and cymbals, the thing that Praise the Lord, praise His name, praise Him, praise Him, praise ye the Lord, praise ye the name of the Lord, praise Him, O ye servants of the Lord. Praise ye the Lord, oh give thanks unto the Lord, for He is good, and His mercy endureth forever. Praise ye the Lord, praise ye the Lord, from the heavens, praise Him in the highest. Oh yeah, yeah. Praise Him upon the high cymbals. Praise Him upon the loud sounding cymbals. In the day, the paragraph. Praise the Lord. Praise His name. Praise Him. Praise Him.
Prayers for our sister Lisa, that our Lord and Savior be with her in the courtroom as her advocate. In Jesus' name. See y'all later.
rescued me. Thank the Lord. In the book of life, oh, he signed my name. He keeps on doing great things for me. Set my spirit free. And my soul was lost. Jesus paid the cost. Holy, Holy Ghost.